Hi, so today I'm going to talk about status and comparison. So I've spoken about status itself, the importance of it, how it's kind of an evolutionary construct, spoken around sort of how status can influence our identity and our goals and the risks that are associated with that. So now I'll talk a little bit around comparisons and some of the risks with comparison. So like I've said, status is really important for us. So one of the things that comes with status is we're going to compare our status to other people, because to have elevated status, you have to have metrics or data points or comparison points to compare other people. Otherwise, how would you know that you've got elevated status over others? So in the way that the world has evolved over the last 1,000 years, we've kind of got to the point where status now is around suburbs that you live in. It's around the size of your house. It's around the car you drive. It's around your social media followers. It's around your paycheck. So financial income is a massive one when it comes to status. Okay, it's around your job description, your job title, the job that you're doing. So there's all these sort of things that we have which we see as important to giving us increased status. And this even starts at a really early age, because children will get grades in their school and that gives them status in certain classes. So they look at other kids to determine their level of status. So you have these academic status, we have sporting status, because kids look at how well they perform against other kids. And then we have these elite academies. We have classes for kids that are a little bit more advanced. And we have classes for kids that are underdeveloped. So imagine what that's doing to the status that these children have and the comparisons they're making to other children. So our world is pretty much set up for status and comparison, okay, amongst a number of other things, or a lot of other things. So as we go through life, it's always comparison, and then we grade classes based on how good we are. We grade people in just about everything we do. We're immersed in this environment where we're constantly comparing our level of status to other people's status. So the risk that comes with that, when we talk about mental health and even worse cases, suicide, is that when you look at the suicide data, the countries that are most developed, so all our Western countries, have the highest rates of suicide compared to sort of third world countries or less developed countries. So countries where there's actual legitimate threats about starvation, about not having enough water, about war, about confrontation, disease, death, all these sort of things, those countries have better mental health outcomes than countries where we have everything available to us, where we can have a drone drop food into a house in the middle of the night if we want to, where literally we do not have to leave our house to survive. Everything's around comfort. We have temperature controlled environments. We have all this great stuff. Okay, but our mental health or our suicide rates are a lot higher than these countries with a real threat. And then when we look into that data a little bit more, within these developed countries, it's the parts of society where they're lower socioeconomic, so where there's lower income, lower resources, these sort of things, they have the highest suicide rate. So you have to ask the question, are they making comparisons from what they have to what other people have, or to what is out there? So are they comparing the house they live in to the house that's a few suburbs over? Are they comparing their car to the cars that other people have? Are they comparing their job title to other people's job titles? Okay, so a lot of it is around status and comparison. But the interesting thing is we only ever really compare up. So even when we take in the context of low socioeconomic areas, so a really poor house now has more resources, has more availability to things that are going to help improve their life than kings of 100 years ago or 200 years ago. So even in low socioeconomic areas now, everyone there has a phone, everyone has the internet, everyone has access to all these things. Most people have cars, they have access to transport, free schools, all this sort of stuff, where 200 years ago, none of that existed. Okay, so what was considered luxury then is poverty now. But we don't really compare to the past or compare down, we just compare up. And when we're comparing up, it's all we're going to see is the gap between our status and what we're seeing up. So when we're using status and comparison, we have to be aware that a lot of times we're just looking at what we can get. And when we're looking at it through that lens, there's always going to be somebody that has more than us. There's always going to be somebody of elevated status. So if that's the metric that we're using, or that's what we're chasing, then we're never going to be fulfilled. We're never going to have enough. At some point, you're going to have enough in your life to be comfortable, and that's going to be able to do us. And even when we look at financial income, there's kind of an inverted U-curve that shows that at what it takes to live a comfortable life is where happiness peaks. And then any income over that actually decreases happiness. So people on low income are unhappy. Okay, people on sort of what they need to survive are happy. People on high incomes are unhappy. Okay, so it shows that money as a status symbol isn't something that makes us happy. Okay, it's something that we need at a certain point. So poverty certainly won't make you happy. But at some point you've had enough, okay? And that's one of the things that when we're looking for status and comparisons is we don't take into account is having enough. And the last sort of example I'll use is I was watching some Formula One documentaries, and they'll show young drivers there who have gotten into Formula One, and they talk about their dreams of being a Formula One driver. They talk about how that's all they focused on. They get to Formula One, and now they've achieved their dream. But that's not really where it is, because when they enter Formula One at a point of status, they're the lowest level. They're the youngest driver. They're the rookie. So they start to talk about the youngest driver to win races, or the youngest driver to win a championship. So they start looking for these points, or status points, that they can use as comparison to previous drivers. And then they talk about podiums, and then they talk about wins, and then they talk about championships. So as a child, you get into Formula One, that's not enough. Okay, you get into Formula One, you get a podium, that's not enough. You get a podium, that's not enough. You get a win, that's not enough. You need a championship, that's not enough. You need 2 championships, and so on, because people continually look at the next point of status or compare themselves to somebody that's been there previously. So, but if we went back and they realised that getting into Formula One to achieve their dreams, that's enough, and anything from there is just a bonus. It's just something that is completely unexpected and just gives them a huge amount of satisfaction, then they'd be happy. They wouldn't have all this mental anguish that's actually impeding their performance anyway. So once we understand what we need, we understand where we're happy to fit within the status, and we stop making comparisons, then we're going to reduce a lot of this mental pain that we're introducing to ourselves anyway. So for most people, the sources of all their pain comes from the way they see the world anyway. It comes from their status, it comes from the way they're pursuing identities and goals, and it comes from their comparisons. So if you can kind of work out that happiness is a byproduct of the way you identify yourself, the way you behave, what you find valuable, what you're willing to have as enough, then happiness will be something that you experience a lot more of. If you think that by increasing status, by increasing things, by constantly pursuing, you're going to get happiness at some point, then sadly you're just going to keep pursuing things, and you're never actually going to find happiness. It's just something that you think other people have, and you want what they have because you think that's going to give you happiness. And this is obviously definitely a much larger topic, but I hope that's given you a little bit of an understanding and giving you some ideas around how you can go and start to change the way status, the way that impacts identity, goals and comparison is having on your life, and you can start to manipulate a few things or change a few things so that you can get some better outcomes. So I hope you got a few takeaways from that, and I look forward to the next presentation.